Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Bay Area Musicians Podcast. I am your host, Matt Gretter. Thank you so much for joining us. It is a pleasure to be here today, as always. This is so much fun to do. And I know I say this in almost every single episode that we have done so far, but this is also a very, very special episode because today we have a very special friend who I have known probably since 2017 or maybe even earlier, depending on who you ask. But he is a phenomenal country music singer-songwriter and band director, and is also one of the most renowned worship leaders in the Bay Area at Central Peninsula Church. He is an absolutely incredible music extraordinaire and just a wonderful person all around. Everybody, please welcome Mr. Brandon Pasion to the show. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing really good, man. Thank you for that. Really nice. I feel like I just got a big hug from you.
I always love to do that, whether embrace physically or just with words. I love doing it. Love it.
That was a big old word hug.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We've known each other for quite a few years. Like I said, probably going back to either 2017 or even earlier. And there's many stories that have come along the way, which we'll have the pleasure of being able to share a couple of those. And but for just in case if you're not exactly sure what the Bay Area Musicians Podcast is all about, we're just trying to shine the light on the music industry out here, introduce the incredible musicians that inhabit this area. And even though that it's not, L.A., New York, or Nashville type music scene, it's still very rich out here, and we're just trying to shine a little bit of a light on it. So for those who may not know, just what is your general background? Where were you born? Were you born into a musical family, or are you first generation, or who influenced you as a musician? Things like that.
That's good. I was born to, I think, first and foremost, and probably my largest influence, I was born into a pretty musical family. My grandpa, who you'll hear stories about, I write a lot of stuff with him, but growing up, he was just a major influence. My grandpa was he's still with us too, and he's a great voice. He was always he never really performed on a large scale, but he was always a poet, had an awesome voice, and that passed down to my dad. My dad tried to pick up an instrument, played jazz guitar, even though he doesn't read any music at all, doesn't even know what chords he's playing. And so when we all get together, when our family gets together, we just sing. And it can be overwhelming. Like if I were to bring you, maybe you'd dig it because you're a musician, but some people, like I remember bringing my wife the first time to my family, I was like, just so you know, it's a little different than your family. We're going to at some point break out a guitar. Everyone's going to be singing. We're all going to be singing harmony. And so I would say that upbringing, and that was in San Jose where I was born, that upbringing, it was probably a major, major piece of making me the musician, music lover, all that kind of stuff that I am today. So I can just keep going. So as I matured, my parents found faith when I was like 9 years old, and they got really into it really quick. My dad decided he wanted to be a pastor, and so he basically they signed up for like some Christian music record club, and we were getting CDs, which were like the hot ticket back then. I remember the era of tapes, and then as we went into CDs, being like, these are the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And so CDs would come, and my grandma in 6th grade got me a CD player. And the only CD that I could find that was worth anything was this Christian artist named Michael W. Smith. And so I started playing him every night as I was going to sleep. And I would just listen to he hasn't aged that well as far as his music. Like, it definitely sounds like pretty 80s now. Uh-huh. But if you listen to his writing and his chords and all that kind of stuff, it was just, it really, really influenced heavily my music and the way that I play. That CD in particular, the Second Decade Hits album, Michael W. Smith. When I play piano, if you know that record, you'll hear licks from that record whenever I play piano. And no matter how many times I've tried to escape it, no matter how much better at piano I think I've gotten, that's what like formed my early music. And so all my writing has a little bit of that, which is actually kind of one of the biggest reasons I started playing guitar, because I was like, I need to write different. And it's funny, I'll write a completely different song when I write with a guitar.
Yeah, kind of along those same lines, not necessarily songwriting, but as far as being like approaching the drum kit differently. Like, for example, all it would take would just be like a different sounding set of like cymbals. And just having that different sound characteristic, it just naturally makes you play the kit differently than you normally would. It's a completely weird thing to kind of explain, but it's just based on what you hear, it influences what your creative outlet is and how you want to express yourself.
Yeah,
which is absolutely amazing. Are you initially from the Bay Area, or?
Yeah.
Oh, I heard at one point you were in Visalia at some point. Was that a move that you did, or then you just came back to the Bay Area also, or how did that work out?
Yeah, we've lived in a lot of places. Grew up in the Bay Area, San Jose, and then my parents, when my dad decided he wanted to go into ministry, my mom's family was all from the Midwest in Iowa. Mm-hmm. And so he decided that he would go to seminary in the Midwest and that we would move our whole family out there. So we left my dad's family, and from like 9 years old to my junior year in high school, we lived in Iowa, a couple of years in Minnesota. And then finally my senior year, my dad got another pastor job back out in San Jose. And so we moved back to the Bay Area. So Visalia was actually later, after I got married, after we had our first kid. Visalia, I was there for like 5 years, and I went from like 2012 to 2017 or so, probably about right when we met.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And as you started writing your own songs, it seems like that country was definitely your niche as far as your songwriting. Were there any specific influences that influenced your country writing process? And how did that form as far as like your actual, like when you're writing your albums, how did that influence the writing process?
Yeah, what's interesting is, so when I first started writing music, I was writing like in high school. I was writing like 90s love ballads that sounded a lot like Michael W. Smith. Very cheesy, overwhelmingly lovey-dovey songs for girlfriends that I didn't even have. And with big sweeping key changes. And I had like a little cheap little Yamaha keyboard, but I thought it was so cool because it could do multi-track recording. And so I would record like the piano part, the drums, the strings, and all that kind of stuff on it, and I'd make these like really cheesy 90s ballads. And then I moved into starting writing Christian music when I started becoming a worship leader. And that's what I thought I was going to be doing. And I decided in 2015 that I was going to make an album. I had a lot of people that were supporting it, and they were saying, if you did a Kickstarter, the album would get funded immediately. And so I decided, to put together a Kickstarter campaign, and it was pretty cool. As I was going through it and putting together what I was going to do and trying to describe what I was going to do, I was talking to a friend, and they were like, so what are you going to do? They knew I had started writing country, and they're going to do worship or country. And I said, well, I'm going to probably do a worship album because nobody even knows me as a country writer. Mm-hmm. And I could hear the disappointment in my voice. I didn't want to make a worship album at that point in my life. Country at that time felt more honest to me, and I felt like I could write stuff that was more true to what my heart was feeling. And someone just said, you know what, if you want to do a country album, write a country album. And so I decided to do that. And my grandpa is best friends with a guy named Larry Bastian. And Larry Bastian was a major hit writer for a lot of different artists in the 90s, 80s and 90s. But biggest is Garth Brooks. So he did Rodeo, he did Unanswered Prayers, and my grandpa they're still best friends. Wow.
Did Larry Bastian actually have a physical hand in some writing songs with you?
Yes. Yeah. That's kind of part of the journey is as I started becoming better as a writer, my grandpa introduced me to Larry. And so when I moved down there, I actually met Larry before I moved down there, but when I moved down there, that was an opportunity because that's where Larry lives. He doesn't live in Visalia, but lives pretty close to him. And so we got to go out there, and Larry basically taught me how to write songs. So the songs that you hear from me are all going to have a pretty 90s country influence, and that's because the guy that really taught me how to write country well was Larry Pasion.
Cool. Is there, like, particularly, there's your first album that, at least that I'm aware of, that you released, which I think was about a 6 or maybe song, a 7-song EP, which is All I Ever Want.
Yep.
What was that process like, and what happened exactly when you decided to release that EP?
Yeah, so I had written some great songs with Larry, and so off of that album, I had started to expand into writing country songs on my own too. But I wrote a song called "When Love Leaves" with Larry, "Muscle Shoals" with Larry,
which is my favorite song, by the way.
I love that song. And I'm trying to think if there was another one on there. But, you know, I had these songs that I was starting to get really proud of. And so when we did the Kickstarter, and my friends were right, we raised everything we needed to raise in a matter of like days.
Wow.
And, you know, Kickstarter gives you 30 days, and we were done. And so, my friend had built a studio in his garage, my friend Nate, and it wasn't your average garage studio. It was like really, really well done. He's just he's actually a professional audio video installer now. But so we recorded it in his garage studio with all of my friends that I knew back then. All the best people that I could have that I knew would play it on my album. And we put together this thing, and it was definitely harder than I thought it would be. I've since recorded, since I did that album, we pieced everything together. So we started with like drums, and then we did bass, and then we did like guitars. And I've since recorded in different environments where we actually have the rhythm section come in all together. The bass, the drums, the guitar, me playing, and even if it's just a scratch vocal, me singing. And the chemistry that I've gotten is so much better. It's closer to live. And it has a little bit more energy. So I wasn't super happy. In fact, when I got, I don't know if you ever feel like this, Matt, about stuff that you make, but when you make something, you feel really vulnerable about it. In fact, Larry used to say, when you write a song and you share it with someone, they don't like it, it's like them telling you your kids are ugly.
I get the feeling, though. I really do.
Yeah. And so I put that album out. It wasn't exactly what I pictured. So some bad stuff, some negative stuff happened in the mixing process. One of the producers kind of dropped out halfway through. So it didn't end up exactly the way I wanted it. And so it was a couple of years ago that I said, I just don't want this out there. And I took it off of Spotify.
Oh, okay.
So if you've been looking for that stuff on Spotify, it's not on there right now. I think you can still find it. Muscle Shoals, I think the most popular thing is the cover you did of it.
Which is on my YouTube channel, Matt Gretter, by the way.
I really would love to re-record that album, honestly. Like, knowing what I know now, because I recorded that before I did any shows, before I had any experience of, like, I was arranging church music, which, as you know, it's a different genre.
Yeah.
And so I would love to come back to those songs and put the grit on it that they need. I feel like the more recent recordings that I have are more reflection of what I'm doing live now. So.
Cool. And if and when it ever gets to that point, if you need a drummer, I'm there.
Oh yeah, man. You'll destroy it.
Oh,
in a good way.
Thank you. So generally, what we try to highlight is the overall, like, Bay Area music scene and like your experiences in terms of playing not only just in the Bay Area but maybe neighboring regions as well.
Yeah.
Just generally, how has the Bay Area music scene been like for you in your experience? Has it been difficult in trying to get shows in certain places, or is it easier in other places, or just generally, where do you find your live hotspots are in terms of getting gigs?
Yeah, I would say so. I started playing when I recorded that album. then I was like, well, I have this thing now. I better start playing shows. And I had played. There was a friend of ours that said that was actually back up here in the Bay Area, not where I'm living now, but over in the far East Bay, kind of like the Delta almost. And it was a place called Lear Vineyards, and they were doing this contest that basically they were having bands compete, and they wanted to start doing a bigger concert series. And so little local bands would compete, and if a local band won, they would get to open for whatever these big concerts were. And I think it was Kelly Pickler that was coming up. And so,
oh, that's nice.
I put together my friends. We were not a band. It was just some friends. Some of the people that recorded the album weren't available, so I just kind of pieced together whoever I knew down there, and we put together this little band. We played the gig that was supposed to be our audition, and after the gig, they said, "You know what? We're not hearing any more bands. This is our band that's gonna win the whole thing."
Man.
So that was our first gig. Was the audition. Our second gig was on a stage with like 3,000 people in the audience and Kelly Pickler. So it's like it was very, very surreal just getting thrown into that.
Yeah.
And then I just tried to slog it out, and that was in the Valley, which is a very, very different experience than Bay Area. So the Valley is closer to what I've understood is kind of like what Nashville is like. The pay isn't there for a lot of gigs unless you go to private gigs. So we were playing bar gigs for like 4 hours, $400 total for the whole band, and just trying to play wherever we could down there. And then when I finally moved up here, that's when I started realizing that the private stuff up here is really, really great.
Yeah.
But what I found, I think the hardest thing for me with music, and then we'll maybe get into what you wanted with this question, is I found really quickly I really wanted to perform the music that I wrote. And it was an artistic expression. And you even heard me just dip into like the money side of things for a bit. There's this feeling that if you're not making money, you're not successful. That's a feeling that I was always fighting.
Yeah.
And so I always felt like if I was taking a not great gig, even if there was a great crowd and it wasn't paying well, that I was failing. And so when I got up to the Bay Area, there was a lot more money up here. But in order to do the gigs that paid better, where you feel quote unquote successful, you're doing stuff that you wouldn't necessarily want to do, like weddings and private shows and that kind of thing.
So in a way, it's like you're gaining one thing, which sort of that feeling that we're fighting of you wanting to be an artist, but the money's not there. Well, now you're finally getting it with private stuff, but you're sacrificing in a way kind of who you are as an artist.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
And so it's a double-edged sword where you are yourself, but the financial reward isn't there sometimes. But when you're pretty much, as the phrase goes, put yourself in a lie, that's where the financial success is. And it's a double-edged sword on both sides.
100%. Yeah. And so I kind of chased that for a while and just tried to get whatever. And for a while, I was kind of just saying yes to whatever I could do.
Yeah.
And in the Bay Area, that was a lot of. I seemed to be going over to Livermore a lot. I played tons of wineries in Livermore, which that got me connections with wine people in Napa. So I was doing that. I never really played much of the bar scene. I don't even know, really, to be honest, if there is much of a bar scene in the Bay Area because I haven't played those. But I started figuring out that there were people that wanted to hear an honest, like, songwriter expression. I started finding those people, and that was really, really cool because there are people that will kind of like do a backyard concert and they'll invite 100 of their friends.
Yeah.
And they'll say basically like, hey, pay $20 a person to come to this backyard party, bring a bottle of wine, and they all have a great time. And you get to share your songs, your stories, where the songs came from, all that kind of stuff. And those nights ended up being my favorite nights. And so I started realizing that if I could produce my own shows and then ship that show to people, and then I would start calling wineries like Myriad as well, who had me out all the time. I had built trust with them, and I said, hey, I have a show that's like a 90-minute thing. I think that your crowd would love it. And sometimes they would bite, and they would have us out. I've done that at Myriad as well. I've done that at Wente out in Livermore. And then we started kind of expanding that up into Yountville. For some reason, the wine people like the country music. I don't know why. And then there was a show here that I don't know. I feel like maybe I wanted you to play this show with me once and you couldn't do it. But it was this backyard show in Redwood City. It's actually in Emerald Hills. Mm-hmm. And she has this beautiful backyard. They've kind of built like this concrete stage. And there's a pool between you and the audience, but she fits 100 people back there.
Yeah, I remember being at your most recent show there. I was there with that. And Brianna was there. Her parents were there.
That's right, yeah. Those are my favorite nights. As you remember, like, I get to tell all the stories. And we have people that we laugh together. We make spontaneous songs on Chat GPT. Uh-huh. We cry together. It's just those are why when I started writing songs, those nights are what I pictured.
Yeah. And that has to be where you feel the most reward overall for the work that you have done up until this point.
100%.
Those nights are when you feel it. I remember there were a couple of when I was with a cover band, Whiskey Pass. We did a few backyard concert shows down in eastern San Jose. We did that for a couple of years, and that was a really fun vibe. Had a stage in the backyard, and everybody brings their own snacks, bottle of wine, and everything, and everybody has a great time.
Oh yeah, and you get to know the host, and they're offering you beers, and it's like a really great vibe. It's totally different than if you've ever played like, I would say like the opposite of that is like a casino.
Yeah,
where like you come in, do your job, and get the heck out of there. And
you're just serving as background noise.
Yeah. Don't talk to people. And you're going to hear casino slot machines going off while you're
I wish I had that sound effect right now, but I don't. But that'd be funny. But no, I get it though. I've had that experience too. It's like just play background music. That's it. On one hand, those gigs, like to the extent that we were talking about earlier. Yeah, casinos generally because they're. A lot of money flows through there. They may be well-paying gigs, but it's not it doesn't satisfy the artist at the heart. So that's where that double-edged sword comes into play every now and then. But it's the backyard concerts, especially for you and me, where we feel the most reward for what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I've been seeing that there's a little bit more of a hunger for that in the Bay Area. And what people like so much about it, as opposed to going, and I'm not knocking going to Shoreline or like you can see all the major artists and stuff, but as opposed to going to like a big show or like a rowdy bar show, there seems to be a movement of people going to these little, what Nashville would call like listening rooms, where there's a respect for the music and people want to hear the songs. I went to a show with a songwriter named Olivia Barton a couple months ago, and I forget what venue it was at in San Francisco, but it was maybe 30 people. And we were in there, and I was kind of sad, but as she started playing, I realized we're having this beautiful, sacred moment with this artist, and I'm hearing every word of her song. You know, the sound is really good, and I'm like, man, this is really honest. And there's beauty, and it's such a beauty. Art is such a beautiful thing, musical art. And sometimes when it has to serve a purpose, like let's get drunk people dancing, which is also a fun way to play music.
Yeah.
But if that's the only thing you ever do, which is when you hear country music, that's what most people think country music is. They think, oh yeah, let's just go get people who are drunk, get them out on the dance floor and giving money and buying more drinks.
No, that's not really the case at all. In fact, this is true. Brianna and I, in our band 2 Week Streak, we had a show last night at Marvin Gardens in Belmont, which is also an amazing venue if you want to see a nice local show. Very intimate experience. The band's right there, like all patio seating and fire pits and all that. It's a really cool experience. But
it's very cool. You get drinks, you can get food. My wife and I went, not to the last show, but we went a couple shows ago, and it was just such a fun night.
Yeah, and that's the type of crowd where in our last 2 shows there particularly, that the audience is getting up and dancing, but they're not hammered. They're just there enjoying the music.
Yeah,
and that's what makes that show worthwhile. You could you could pay us $1 million for that show, but if nobody's there, $1 million ain't worth it.
Is that what they're paying these days?
I wish. No, but anyway, it's just that getting up and dancing vibe, which I'm not trying to say that getting drunk people up and dancing doesn't give you as an artist adrenaline to keep playing, but even more so when it's people having a good time and they're there for the music and they're getting up and moving at their own free will, and they're coherent.
Yeah.
So
the other thing for me that probably is different than your band is if I had my way, and I know this is not the status of most of society, I love sad songs.
I agree with that too.
And to the point where when I took my album off of Spotify and what was left was like 2 really devastatingly sad songs. And then I keep writing more. And I don't know what it is about like the beauty of the broken that I love so much. And that is hard. That's a harder spot to fill for people to come to. That's like a different ask. If I'm like, hey, Matt, come have a good time and have some drinks and be at a bar and play. Or Matt, come to a really intense like psychotherapy session through music. The 2 very different things, and so I have to manage that balance too.
That's my favorite therapy session to go to.
That's right.
But anyway, I find the sad songs, which on one hand are contrary to what you would think, like a bar gig would be, which is normally high energy, get up and people dancing. However, though, it seems like I would like to think from a writer's perspective, like the sadder songs, those tend to be the most honest ones, lyrically, because I would like to think that the emotion, especially during the writing process, is the most raw you can get, and therefore it's the most honest.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, despite a lot of people who may be getting up and dancing to the more upbeat type songs and stuff, there are people out there who are fighting battles that we are not aware of. Yeah. And it just may so happen that one time that you perform that sad song, or if you perform a whole bunch of them, that there's somebody out there, whether you know it or not, that needs to hear it.
Yeah.
That really speaks to that. One song in particular, it's not necessarily a sad song, but it does speak to, I think, a wide audience of people who are fighting their own battles. Jelly Roll's newest release, "I Am Not Okay."
Oh yeah. I think that's really relatable.
And in fact, I have been playing that song on repeat every time that I go to bed, and I wake up in the morning and it's still playing.
Wow.
And it's like, think of that being a lullaby song, but every once in a while, it's like, this is a song that you need to hear. You may not be necessarily hanging on for dear life, as one of the verses says, but you may be overwhelmed a little bit with something that's going on in your life, and that's a song that really helps me or a lot of people actually get through it. I've seen a couple of comments about it on YouTube where, in fact, this one comment, I'm not going to mention any names, but the content of it said that this song saved her from suicide 3 times.
Wow.
And so that's just the power of a sad song or a depressing song can actually do. It can actually save people. It really can.
Yeah, I think they're really honest. Like think about like the song that you, I think, mentioned before we pressed record, "Say Goodbye." I think about where that came from. And, as a person who works at a church, one of the things that they don't really prepare you for is you're gonna help people transition through life's hardest moments.
Yeah.
And that also includes death.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you go to an inordinate, I've been to more funerals than the average person because I'm typically asked to either be there as a pastor or I'm asked to do music for funerals. And so I was in that season of realizing that, and I was meeting with a mentor of mine, Walt Hoffer, who was in his 80s at the time. And I was newly married, and he was talking to me about how I basically I was focusing on the wrong stuff in marriage. That I was worried about these little fights that we would have, and all the stuff that you have to get used to when you move in with someone for the first time.
Yeah.
And he just said, I remember he looked at me across the table and he said, Brandon, I just don't worry about any of that stuff. And I was like, well, that's nice. And he's like, no. He goes, the only thing I worry about is I know that someday we're going to have to say goodbye. We've been married for 55 years. And I just hope that I'm not the one who has to say goodbye first. Like at some point, this amazing ride that we're on is going to end. And so I want to love like I'm running out of time. And I was like, wow. And at that point in my life, I don't think I was even writing country music yet. But I wrote it down. And I wrote it down in a journal. And I just said, this sentiment has to get out somewhere. And it wasn't until years later when Walt passed away that I actually wrote this song and kind of found a little story. And I wrote this song, Say Goodbye. So for me, when I think about that, it's not just a sad song. It's a beautiful story of how Walt lived his life and how he looked at his life, and he loved doing what most people don't do. Most of us try to avoid thinking about death, and he would live knowing that time is precious.
And that death could come at any moment.
Yeah, and so he made the most of every moment, and I just think the world of that. And so when I listen to that song, I still, kind of get choked up.
Yeah, and that's also one of my favorite songs to listen to. And as you said, it's a very beautiful song, and it has an incredible story and message. And whenever I feel like there's some certain troubles that I'm going through, or both Brianna and I are going through, like small troubles in marriage and stuff, it's like, well, we'll reference that song, and actually, it actually renews our love together. It really does.
That, I can't tell you what that does to my heart to hear you say that. Like that's why we write. That's why we do songs. That's why we play music, right? Like that your music or your art could potentially affect someone positively is like that. Like you said, that's better than $1 million.
Yeah, I like to believe, and I've also heard it be said that music is a completely different language in its own self. And I feel like a lot of times an artist is God's vessel to earth. And and the songs that you write, not just Say Goodbye, but all the songs that you have, they are a communication of your soul, your feelings, which in turn I believe is exactly what he's trying to say to the rest of humanity.
I love that.
And so that doesn't go, that doesn't go for just you. That goes for every single artist out there. Sorry, you got a little mucus here.
Little frog in your throat.
That
would actually make it for a good country song if you could figure out how to sing like that. Like, yeah, Mary, listen when you cry.
Or just maybe do Johnny Cash or whatever the case may be.
Wow, that's impressive.
So don't get me started on Folsom Prison Blues because I'll actually start trying it. But no, that's all really cool. As we've pointed out a couple of times, that you are now as you have been for a while, the worship leader for Central Peninsula Church in Foster City, California, which is an absolutely amazing church. When did you become the worship leader, and what has your experience there been like overall, as a musician, as a pastor, worship leader? How's that been?
I would say that the church was, through all this music stuff, the church was kind of and I hate to say it like this, but as musicians say, sometimes you got to have a day job. And for a long time, the church was sort of my day job to support the music career that never made any money. And it's not that you're making tons of money at church, but it's a stable job and it has benefits and all that kind of thing. And but I would say when I got to CPC, what changed for me was I realized that this church was the real deal. This church was as honest as all the country songs I was writing. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize it, but sometimes, I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but Christianity can sometimes, certain certain sections of Christianity can sometimes feel like you have to be perfect or like you have to have it all buttoned up. And so if you were to walk into a church, sometimes you might feel like, oh, I'm not going to ever say what's really going on with me. Or I'm going to make sure I don't accidentally swear, or I'm going to make sure I don't show this part of me, you know?
Because if any flaw is shown, I will be judged.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, CPC was so different. And CPC kind of saw my flaws, and it was the most loving thing. You know, when they see something that's broken or sin or whatever, they'll talk to you about it, because that's the loving thing to do, because they don't want to leave you stuck somewhere. And I think Jesus did the same thing. So they don't just ignore it, but they love you through it.
Yeah.
And so it's just a really, really beautiful, I feel like I found my people. It's not, you know, there's some churches that are like really, really cool and fog machines and all that kind of stuff. Have like really awesome
production.
All that kind of stuff. We're not, I think our band is good. I mean, you play on it, so it must be good, but I think we do a good job, and we have enough production to make sure it sounds good and it looks good. But that's not the focus. The focus is meeting God and being a family together.
Yeah. And
so my favorite moments of church are moments like when I got to be part of your wedding a couple of years ago,
which we'll touch on in a minute.
Oh yeah, okay. I won't go there. But like,
all good.
Those are to me now the gold. And so asking what it's been like for me now, this has now become my main thing. And music, I still write songs for the art of it. I'll still do a show here and there when it makes sense time-wise. But the church role in the music and the ministry has really become kind of my main focus in the last year. So.
That's cool. I think this dives into some story time, like how I got started at CPC as a drummer, and how I became a part of the musicians roster. The
fateful Sunday.
The fateful Sunday. I'll never forget it. But actually, about a couple months before that, this had nothing to do with CPC at the time, but a common friend of ours who was also on the show earlier, Drew Wilson, killer drummer, killer drum tech.
Hi, Drew.
Sound guy, killer everything, who's actually the drummer for Sophia Clare, who is very quickly rising up the ladder. Yeah. And so very proud of him for the opportunity he's got there. But he actually invited me to come to Bel Mateo for a bowling night that you guys were having. Oh, yeah. And just for the sake of like introducing me to the folks who were going to be there and all that, and I'll never forget it. He says, "Hey, Matt, this is Brandon Pasion." And then I shook your hand, and then you say to me, "Hey, Matt, you're famous." I'm like, "Oh, what have you been telling these people, Drew?" I was like, "Oh, my God, you're putting me on a pedestal." But that was the very first time I remember meeting you in person, and we had a fun night there, and everything was all good.
Who won in bowling, do you remember?
I'd say probably you.
Really, yeah. I was pretty obsessed with bowling. I had my own balls.
In more ways than one. Sorry, dirty joke. But so that was the first time we met, and then at that time I was a believer in God, still am today. But I didn't have really an interest in performing worship music. I didn't have a deep knowledge of it at the time, and I was more into rock and roll and country music, of course. But then I get home for a show one night. I think it was in 2000, at the end of 2018, maybe 2 weeks before Christmas or something. It was late in the year, I remember. And I get home from a show, and I'm literally about 30 seconds away from passing out. And then all of a sudden my phone goes off, and it's Drew. And he tells me that he can't cover church, and hey, can you do this? And I'm kind of like, okay, I'll do it. I'm like, what do I got to do? I don't know what to do. I don't know what the setup is like. I don't know what the songs are going to be like. I don't know if I can even play them, but I said, okay, I'll do it.
So before you continue, what was your picture of church music before that? Because you said you really hadn't had much experience with it, right?
Yeah, well, I had heard how do I even put this? As far as like some worship songs that I had at least had heard little snippets of, was those TV commercials that we would see called Worship Together, those CDs.
Oh, wow.
In fact,
inspiring music. It's like really like soft little ballad things.
Oh, no. Yeah, there was a song by Delirious called Shout. That was on it. If I'm remembering the artist, Matt Redman, Back to the Heart of Worship.
Yeah,
that one was on there.
All right.
Sonic Fold, I think.
Sonic Flood. Yeah,
the Sonic Flood. Open the Eyes of My Heart was on there. And all these different CDs, but I had only heard those commercials of it. But I never took the time to, like, as a drummer, really study them.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by, like, what was my picture of worship stuff.
So you get this call at midnight or so, and you say yes to the gig, and he told you our call was like what? It's pretty early, wasn't it?
It was pretty early. I think it was at the time CPC had the Fox Theater, and I think call time was 6.
Yeah, 6 a.m. because we had a fully mobile operation, so we had to roll in all of our drums, everything, set it up live. And yeah, that was, I remember that being a stressful morning. Yeah.
And, so he texted me all the links to the songs, and I stayed up. I wrote everything out as best I could. Thank you to Rich Redmond, Phrase Charting. It has saved me on that account and numerous ones.
Oh yeah.
But, then I write them all out. By the time I'm done, it's about 2 a.m. now.
Oh my goodness.
And I fall asleep, but then I decided to set my alarm for 4:30 because I don't know what all I know is call time, but I don't know what the setup is going to be like. I don't know what the picture is going to be.
So you slept for 2 hours and 30 minutes.
2 hours and 30 minutes, and then I got to the Fox Theater at 5.
Oh my gosh. Were we there yet?
No, you were not. I sat there in my truck, just going over my charts and listening to the songs one more time, just to make sure I had them down.
Wow, I had no idea you went through all of that. That's crazy.
And then I opened the door, and then you turn around, and then you happen to be inside, and then you turn around, you saw me, and I just saw your eyes just light up. I was like, oh my God, Matt Gretter's here.
The famous one.
The famous one. And it all went great, and then you just kept asking me back.
Oh, man, dude.
And so
you're so good. You're such a pro. That's what I was so blown away by. Like, you play the music. You don't try to overcomplicate things. You play what the music needs, and you serve the music, and you have great tempo. You're so flexible. Like you do whatever needs to happen for the gig. Like think about that, man. I mean, you're about to go to bed, and then you spend 2 hours or 2.5 hours preparing for a thing that you have no idea what you're walking into. I was so blown away by you.
Yeah, I figured out a long time ago that I really felt that this was God's purpose for me on earth, to play the drums and also to perform music. And even if it meant sometimes being detrimental to my body or sometimes my health, if it meant being able to play drums and touch one person at the heart of God's gift that He gave me, it was worth it.
Nah, it's pretty awesome.
And so that day happened, and you kept calling me back, and I have enjoyed it ever since. And since then, I have fallen in love with worship music, and I listen to it every day. And it actually grew to the point where you married my wife and I.
I performed the ceremony, just so your listeners are clear. We didn't do like some kind of 3-person wedding ceremony where I was actually marrying and becoming a throuple.
Well, maybe not. Oh God. Okay, but But it was an amazing thing, and we could not have asked for anyone better to marry us at CPC on the stage where we have been performing for the last 7 years now. And
that's incredible. Wow.
Yeah. 7 years that just because of a favor.
Yeah.
That all of this happened.
I think that just goes to show you never know what God has in mind, or an opportunity might come along, and you might have no idea what that's going to lead to, and it led to this cool relationship. And we've done so much musical stuff together. You've recorded with me, played with my band. I mean,
yeah, I remember you were doing at CPC. You were doing a music video for Muscle Shoals.
Yeah,
and you asked me to be a part of that.
Yeah, which you probably never even saw the footage from that, huh?
No, I didn't.
Yeah,
I'm still waiting.
I was embarrassed of the mix because I just had to do a set and forget mix, and it didn't sound as good. But I think the drums sounded good on the mix, so maybe you'd still like to have it.
That's not just because I was playing the drums, hopefully, but I appreciate all the compliments about my professionalism and how I play, but just saying, I think the drums sound good. Well, it's not just because of me. It was a whole bunch of people. The sound people and all that who made the best of what they could set it up. So it's not just the drummer does play the part of bringing the instrument to life, which is obviously the big part of it, but it's not the only part.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. I think you said earlier that I don't think you released it yet, but you actually have a new song that you're thinking about releasing here soon.
Yeah, I got the opportunity to do a great friend of mine that's a big supporter of my music offered to help me get some of the songs produced, and he sent me to a producer named Murray Pulver, and he lives in Winnipeg, Canada, which is right above Minnesota. And so I flew out to Winnipeg and got to spend a week with this guy, Murray. And he actually used to play guitar in a band in the 90s called, I think it was Crash Test Dummies. Have you heard of that band?
No, I haven't.
So they did this. There was a hit that they had that was once there was this guy. It was big in the 90s. And so that's the only time I really heard. I wasn't really a follower of the band, but that was kind of what put him on the map. And so now he instead of living in Nashville, he lives in Winnipeg, where he's from. But they have a group up there that they're my new favorite band in the whole world, the Landreth Brothers, and or maybe it's the Bros Landreth. They just wrote a song with Bonnie Raitt, and he plays slide guitar, and they do just great stuff. And so I got to go up there, record with them. They were my studio band, and so I had this song that I had written with Larry, and Larry was actually shopping it to different artists. And it's by far the song that we've gotten the most traction on as far as trying to get artists to record it.
Uh-huh.
And we've had 2 artists put it on hold, and one of them actually recorded it, but hasn't released it and never released it. So in my head, I'm always like, man, maybe I'll just make my own version of it. So I showed it to them. They loved it, and they got to put their treatment on it. And so, yeah, this is Listen When She Cries, and I'm hopefully gonna release this probably. It's done. It's in the bank. It's ready to go. I just need to put it onto Spotify and release it.
Cool. Would it be okay if we gave our listeners a listen to it?
Oh man, I'd love that. Yeah.
Alrighty. You guys are in for a very real treat. An unreleased song by Brandon Pasion. This is going to be a really great song. This is called Listen When She Cries.
Midnight moon stands waiting for the dawn. The teardrops on her pillow almost dry. Never did he ever dream he'd turn to find her gone. And I bet she learned to listen when she cries. Empty space inside her wardrobe closet. closet, enough to carry on her red-eye white. Tomorrow she'll be back home with her kid in Oklahoma. And a man should learn to listen when she cries. Listen and you'll hear hearts breaking. Listen for the truth she keeps inside. Listen to the promises you made that were forsaken. And a man should learn to listen when she cries. Couldn't see me taking her for granted. And granted, what was taken wasn't right. But hindsight comes to visit when it don't go like you planned it. And a man should learn to listen when she cries. And listen and you'll hear hearts breaking. Listen for the truth she keeps inside. Listen to the promises you made that were forsaken. And a man should learn to listen when she cries. Listen for the truth she keeps inside. Listen to the promises you made that were forsaken. And a man should learn to listen when she cries. And a man should learn to listen when she cries. And a man should always listen when she cries.
Listen when she cries, everybody. That is such a really cool song.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I love that song. And I think they just did such a cool job with it. That slide solo, man, it just feels like I wish you could have heard that live. He had this amp that was just crapping on itself. It sounded so good. Big old baritone guitar. Oh, man, that was such an awesome experience.
So cool. Well, we thank you so much for coming on the show here, Brandon. We really, really appreciate it, and looking forward to many more opportunities with CPC. And who knows, there might be a show for us in the future. You never know.
I hope there is, man. I really want to play a show with you.
Oh, yeah, that would be so, so cool. Well, everybody, we thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Bay Area Musicians Podcast. Goodbye, everybody.